Hey guys, it's Mariav, and today's video will be a deep dive into the vegetable garden pattern. First, of course, we dive into our idea jar and pick out our prompt. And even though the prompt is fruit and vegetable gardens, I chose to stick to the vegetable part of it. And so first and foremost, have research, and I like to show like how I pick my inspiration. And it was a lot of scrolling through Pinterest and figuring out what calls to me, what appeals to me, what I felt worked with the vision that I had. But mostly it's just because these patterns are, like doing one pattern a day on most days, then there's not much time to plan it out and take your time in planning. So I would just go in with, like a blank slate in my mind, no expectations a lot of the time, and just going through what comes up when I write in the prompt to give me ideas of what has happened, what I could possibly use. So here first I'm deciding what colors I would like for my color scheme, and the inspiration, like the image on the left, I really like the gridded effect, the gridded composition in it, and I thought that would be something that could be very cool to play with. And I also really liked how, even though it was a completely 2D illustration, it still managed to make it feel like a field, vegetable garden. And yeah, so that was the main inspiration for the composition. And then the rest of it was also like I experimented with some brushes and just figuring out which colors work with each other. Normally, if I was doing this for a particular project, for example, and not just for the pattern challenge, I would explore a lot more color variations. And but since this is a faster paced project, I go in with my gut, and the part where I'm hunting on Pinterest for whatever idea is sparked is crucial to this process. And here I have a purple lettuce, a purple cabbage that I'm using for the composition. I picked it because it has a very distinct look to it, and I thought the color purple would work really well with the green and the orangey, light orange sand soil. So yeah, I just used that. I did duplicate a lot in this to save time, but also for consistency. And I used Alpha Lock to change up the colors. The vegetable garden, try to find some variety in what I could do, maybe experiment with shadows that could be placed just to add more dimensions and texture to the pattern. And so till this point I hadn't really narrowed down on just doing vegetables, but I realized like a lot of the things that grow on the ground tend to be vegetables. And I also thought the shapes and colors lend themselves a lot better to the composition that I was going for. And so all of this process it's quite organic. One thing that I'm really enjoying about the pattern challenge is that nothing's forced, and it's just a lot of practice that you end up putting into your craft, that like the more you'll practice, the more natural some of these decisions will be when you're working on a time crunch. So if you're a beginner, I would suggest just make a lot of stuff. Just keep at it, and then it'll, like, your work process is going to be much faster. So this pattern is pattern number 19 in the challenge, and it took me 19 patterns to get into the flow of, okay, so like, how do I jump into this and not struggle with inspiration? I guess, like, whenever I used to start illustrations or patterns before this, there's always like that big question of like, what do I make? And even if I had a prompt, I would get too stuck on all the things. It would either be like no idea is coming to me, or there are too many ideas, like I don't know which one to choose. So after like making enough of these, I can be sure on like narrowing down some elements at the beginning of the process has really helped me be more focused. And also like having a bit of a narrative, or like a bit of a, you should know what story you're trying to tell, and like it doesn't have to be that deep or that complicated. Like in this one, the story for the pattern is, if you were to go to a vegetable garden, for example, and like what you'd find there, right? Like strolling, and once you see the full pattern, you'll see like even the spaces between the patches makes it feel like a vegetable garden that you could possibly, like go through or walk through. So yeah, it's made it a lot faster to figure out what to do, how to approach it, how to not let that inner critic interfere with what you want to make, or with making anything, which is something I've always struggled with. So yeah, if you are interested in embarking on this challenge, I would highly recommend it. Even if it's not with patterns, like with anything, I think it's worth going into. But yeah, here I did a little bit of I took a shortcut instead of redrawing the letters, because I really didn't have time. I just changed up the colors for it. And then I tried that with the other vegetables also, just to add variety. And I think variety is very crucial when it comes to patterns. It took me a while to realize that. I think it took me like the first 10 patterns or something. I'm not sure, but variety and having like differences in size and color and even spacing, negative space, is just really important. So here we will be making our repeat pattern, and even though I love Procreate, sometimes it gets a little hard, like trying to get things in the exact correct place, but it's okay, we persevere. There are ways to make that process easier. Like, had I just put a fill layer under whatever illustration I had, it would have been easier. But yeah, so I had exported the patches as PNGs, transparent PNGs, so that I could add them here, as you can see on the screen. And yeah, so it's just a process of trial and error, and you'll see I keep going back and forth on decisions, and that's completely fine. This is another image that I found really inspiring, and I really like the almost flat lay effect or approach, while also making it feel like a field or a garden that you can walk through. So that was my intention with this pattern. And here, going back to the point about variety, so now we're moving towards the final pattern, but we still have to resolve a bit of what's left. I would always recommend experiment with all the blending modes when you're illustrating, especially when you're new to it. And it can, even if you don't plan on keeping it, it's good to experiment with it, because then it opens you up to like possibilities of how it might look. Sometimes I'll just duplicate the layer, have a blending mode, and just decrease the opacity, and then it really improves the amount of like the quality and like the dimension and like the amount of texture that shows through, if that is the kind of style that you want to go for. And sometimes you can have some really fun happy accidents when you do use blending modes. Anyway, so here we're still experimenting with what I should keep, what I shouldn't. I did a lot of copy pasting and duplicating in this one. I normally don't, but I did want to try it out and see if it would make the pattern more cohesive, to have more similar motifs. And it did to a great extent. Like, I was quite happy with how it was turning out. But for the future, I would probably keep like an individual carrot, an individual radish, or like the individual elements as separate layers instead of a grouped layer. Because like when I was creating this, I just painted them all on one layer. And it's also because of the layer limitation on Procreate, but I think I'll just keep like a separate file with just the motifs. So it would have saved me a lot more time where I was like repainting stuff. But it's okay, like we all learn from our mistakes. And here I'm just resolving a bit of the sand. I did reflect, like I did duplicate and flip and change directions of a lot of things. Sometimes just that can add a little more variety to the composition. I went into the previous file to get the transparent PNG layer of lettuce so that I could easily put that there. And now we are on to creating the repeated tile for the pattern. And I added some grass here for the path between the vegetable patches, and I'm quite happy with how the entire thing turned out. I really like the colors also, and it was just a really fun pattern to make, and I hope you had as much fun watching it as I did making it. And even with filling up spaces and patterns, for example with the grass, do it in a way where it adds to the concept of the pattern instead of just making it look like it's there to fill up space, because that can look quite problematic. It can take away from your entire uh, illustration. Here I'm experimenting with texture, so even if I'm not going to use them, I always try out a bunch of texture brushes, and I'm using the selection tool, which is making the entire screen turn pink. So I just thought I should let you know. I can make a separate video on like the different types of selection tools Procreate offers if you guys want, and just to make things easier and faster when you're illustrating. But yeah, so we are finally on repeating the tile that we created. I'm quite happy with it. I can see this appealing to a lot of people who are into gardening, or even, you know, like as a kitchen tower or something. I had a lot of fun, and here I'm exporting all the files to both my iPad and my laptop. And here are the mock-ups that really bring the pattern to life. And I tried to have like a consistent series of mock-ups for all the patterns in the challenge, and I hope this video helped you guys in some way and that you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Bye.